So today I thought we'd take a look at a meta tier list, and the reason that I want to do this is because I've seen some other videos trying to do this similar thing for the new patch, and they're very bare bones and kind of talking about the meta as a whole, and they seem to have just basically gone, the meta will be the same aside from the controllers that have changed and Yoru will be a bit better. That seems to be what most of them are saying, but I think that that is actually pretty wrong and doesn't go in depth as much thinking about how a meta game actually comes about, because of course when a meta changes like it has, I think right now, we've gone from what I would call a heavy control meta to a potentially pretty heavy aggro meta, and we'll see how that goes. But the meta has changed a lot. But then the meta doesn't just stay stable aside from that. The meta reacts to what has changed. Of course it does. And this happens across every single game. And so we need to talk about more than just the agents that have changed, but also what agents are gonna now be better or worse because of the change in meta and how they fit within that meta itself. And so what we're going to do is, and we're talking about a pro meta first here, and then at the very end I'll just quickly touch on ranked and perhaps what a ranked meta might look a bit more like. But to start off, we're going to talk about a pro meta, and we're going to go through each of the 4 classes of agent, talk about where agents will fit within the meta. And overall though, first we need to understand what the meta will be. Of course, we've just come from an Astra Viper meta where everything was pretty slow. I would call it a control meta, where if you tried to 5-stack as a pro team and just run it down into a site, you were going to be met by a Viper Orb into an Astra Suck, into a Viper Molly, into getting mowed down. It wasn't going to go well for you at all. So what we saw in the pro games was a lot of sort of slow defaults, trying to take every inch of map control that was gained was like a big success because we were in a very heavy control meta, and then eventually getting onto site, trying to confuse people for where you might be so that their utility usage isn't ideal. All of that was what was going on. Obviously with the Brim changes and the Astra nerfs and the Viper nerfs, what we're expecting is to be more like your ranked games, right? Where it's going to be faster. It's going to be, put down that stim beacon and let's go. We might see more of that, and we'll see how far teams lean into it. Of course, not every round in a pro game is going to be like that, but, we could see a lot more sort of first tempo 5-stack hitting or 4-stack, just going in onto a site straight away. And so now let's take a look at the agents, and we'll start with the controllers. And so these obviously all changed, and this is still going to be up in the air a bit, but I think Astra overall, I'm going to put her in the C tier. I think that she's still playable on certain maps, and I wouldn't be surprised if early on quite a few pro teams stuck with Astra because they're familiar with her and that's what they've practiced with. And so even if it's quite a lot worse and the timings are a lot more delayed and things like that, and there's one less star, I do still think early on teams will try with Astra, and I wouldn't be surprised maybe if by the end of this she ended up in the B tier, for instance, as a controller that you can still play on certain maps. We're going to see how different teams react, but I would not be surprised if that was the case. Obviously, our big changer and perhaps our big winner was Brimstone, who I think now is an A tier agent. I don't think he's S tier. I don't think he'll be super dominant in the way that like an Astra was before. I think that he'll be good. And he'll see play on probably most of the maps, but not all of them. You won't see play on Breeze, I don't think, or anything like that. But I think he'll see some experimentation on most maps, and he'll definitely become like a staple of maps that he was already pretty good on, like Bind, for instance. He'll just become the staple of those maps, and I think Brim is pretty good. Next up, Omen, and I think I'm going to put Omen in the B tier. I think he'll be kind of, the main replacement for Brim on certain maps. Like a Sent maybe I could see becoming like kind of a duel between Omen and Astra rather than maybe Brim. And I do think Omen will be definitely playable on certain maps, and we might see, quite a bit more Omen than we did before. And then finally, Viper, I'm also going to put in the B tier. The reason Viper is in the B tier is because I still think she is pretty essential on certain maps, like a Breeze, maybe Icebox as well. We'll see with Icebox, obviously, with all the changes, but I still think that Viper will be, very good. It will be essential on Breeze, almost certainly, because her wall is just irreplaceable. So for that reason alone, I think you have to be in the B tier if you're just irreplaceable on a certain map. And I do think she still has that unique ability. Obviously, her wall smoke is different to everything else, and so I still feel some teams might be able to take advantage of that on certain maps. So that was the controllers, and of course they were the ones that were doing the meta shifting, but now let's talk about how that's going to affect everyone else. And we'll start off with the Sentinels. And you might think that if we're going into an aggro meta, Sentinels must be good, right? Because they can stop things. Actually, I think it's quite the opposite. I think that Sentinels will struggle more than they did. And the reason for that is, think about sort of their passive utility gaining knowledge, right? Like the cipher trips and alarm bots and things like that. You put those in areas so that if someone at any point, sneaks into those areas, you have that knowledge of where they are, which suits when teams are playing slow. When teams are trying to, gain all this map control and playing super slow, it helps if you can just leave an area. It doesn't necessarily help if you've got like tripwires and vents, from Cypher or whatever, but they're just running down B site on split. That doesn't help you in that instance. And you might be able to use it differently, but teams can then exploit you if you're only using on sites and things like that. So I don't actually think the Sentinels will do as well. Now, Cypher I think is the big loser because his utility is possibly the worst for that in terms of stopping a full hit. I think Cypher struggles more, whereas Chamber, obviously his do slow things, like his little traps do slow the opponent down and create an area of a slow effect so that you can't just keep running through. And obviously Killjoy has the swarm grenades, which again are going to help with those fast pushes. So I do think that Cypher is kind of the big loser, and so I'm going to put him in the C tier. I think he was probably like borderline B or C tier before, and so now he's just kind of going further down the C tier. I don't think it'll be the biggest effect for these Sentinels, and I think that Chamber will still be A tier, which is where I would have had him before. I think he still will be in there, and Killjoy I think is probably a bit lower down in the B tier overall as well. Again, I do think she will see probably a bit less play because of, though, if this does become more meta, but I still think she'll be picked on certain maps for sure. But the big winner of the Sentinel class, however, I think will be Sage, because Sage is really good at stopping those fast pushes. And this is the thing you need to understand, is if you think about, and I know that Anders, if you haven't seen his videos, are very informative, and I would definitely direct you to his channel as well. I'll leave a link in the description. But he has talked about, the kind of Magic the Gathering triangle that fits for Valorant as well, where you have aggro agents, you have mid-range agents, and you have control agents. And the way it works in Magic the Gathering is mid-range beats aggro, but control beats mid-range, and aggro beats control. So if we're going into an aggro meta, that means that mid-range will win. And the thing is, the other Sentinels are all pretty control-y, but Sage is more mid-range. When you think about her abilities, her wall goes down after a certain amount of time. That's not control, that's mid-range, right? Like, it can stop you for a time, but not the whole round. And then she has slows as well, but they are really good at stopping a 5-stack push. You think about it, Sage is probably the best agent in the entire game by far at stopping a 5-stack push, because she can put up that wall and then double slow you, and you're in trouble then, because there's no way you can fast get through all of that utility. There is literally no way you can do it. And a good Sage pro player will be able to find the right time and wait for that right time when they think that hit is coming, and then use all their utility. And that will be a big problem if this does become meta. So Sage, I think, is a big winner, and I would have put her maybe at low B tier before, but I think she could be high B tier, if not A tier even, when all things are said and done, depending how much teams really lean into this aggro meta. So I'm going to put Sage, if I can, above Omen here. I'm going to put Sage at the top of B tier for now. I think she was definitely a big winner for the ability to be able to stop those fast pushes. Then we come to the Initiators, and the Initiators I think will go largely unchanged. The reason for that is because they are the mid-range agents. They are the ones that can adapt and react the best out of anything, because they get that rechargeable free utility, which definitely helps them, no doubt. So I think the Breach overall will still be a B tier agent. He'll still definitely see play on Fracture and some play on other maps as well. I do think he was hurt a bit by the Astra nerf, because obviously the Astra suck, plus Breach is a big part of his kit. But I think overall he'll still stay in the B tier for now. I still think he'll do okay in this meta. KO, I think actually KO here could become an S tier agent, to be honest. I'm going to put him at the top of A for now. He probably already was at the top of A for me. And I think he has the possibility to go into S, because if it does become a very heavy execute fast meta, KO is very good for site executes, and then also, the retake as well. If it does become like the worst meta we can imagine, with just like every team just pushing the site, every team playing retake, and then, you retake and you see who wins the round that way. If that becomes the meta, KO will dominate in that meta, because that is what he is very, very good at indeed. So we'll have to see how much teams really lean into it, but I do expect KO to be pretty good. Same for Skye. I mean, Skye is just pretty good, right? Skye has also always been pretty decent, and I think she will continue to be pretty good. at this moment in time. And Sova, I still think is S tier. He might have slightly been punished. If it does go super fast, you know, you think about things like a drone, for instance. Like, if the meta goes super fast, and I don't think it will, but if it does, Sova could be an agent that gets punished a bit, because, you know, you think about droning from far away and things like that. And darting from far away as well. Often Sova's kind of near the back of the team. If it does go super fast, Sova could see himself punished, because KO and Sky, you know, can do everything on the go. If it does become Brimstone, Smoke, and Go, if that becomes the meta, then, you know, KO and Sky can do it on the go. You know, they can flash on the go, they can knife on the go, they can do a lot of things on the go with the team. Whereas Sova is kind of, you know, normally a bit removed from the team, kind of doing things from further back, kind of supporting his team from afar. But I do still think he's just so powerful. Like, his abilities to info gather are just super unique and super powerful anyway. And so he's kind of unrivaled in that sense anyway. So I do expect Sova still to be S tier. And then finally we come to the Duelists. If I could, I would create an S plus and put Jet in it. But we'll put Jet for there for now. And obviously, if you are entering an aggro meta, you'd expect all the Duelists to be elevated. The problem is, for most of the Duelists, is that Jet exists. And so there's no reason to play any of those, because Jet will do what they do, but do it 10 times better and just be much better as a whole for your team. And you should pick Jet almost all the time. So that is true. Certain maps there is an argument for Raze, but the rest I think are still struggling. So maybe they got a bit better. So maybe we can put Neon, for instance. I would have put her before in like low C tier. Now let's put her maybe at the top of C tier. Unfortunately, Phoenix I still think is down there. Raze I think is a big winner, because we could see more double Duelists, particularly on maps like Split and Bind, where we're already seeing some of it. I wouldn't be surprised if we did see more Brimstone or Omen really on that map. It can still fit as well. But, you know, those agents plus Raze plus Jet, run both, you know, really go in for this aggro kind of style. We were already seeing some of it, so it might, you know, take off really. And so I do expect Raze to be a pretty big winner, and I would have had her at like the top of B before, but I think now with this meta she goes into A, because also she fits the defensive side of it as well, right? If teams are stacking up and going in as a team, Raze has a grenade that can, you know, deal a lot of damage to when people are stacked up. Raze's ult is really good when people are stacked up together. That's what Raze is really good at. So if it does become that is, you know, where we're leaning towards in this meta, then I do think that Raze will just get better. Then we come to Reyna, and Reyna, unfortunately, I just don't think is useful in the pro level. In a ranked level is a different story, but at the pro level, I don't really see why you would ever pick Reyna, to be honest. You're just going to get more value out of almost every other agent. And then finally, Yoru. You know what? I'm going to throw Yoru a bone and give him in the C tier. I'm not quite sure exactly where he'll fit. I wouldn't be surprised if he was B tier. I would not be surprised if he was still D tier. So I'll put him in C for now, kind of, you know, just kind of like I don't really know where Yoru will end up at this point. We'll have to see. But I'm definitely hoping that someone will pick him. And, you know, hopefully we will see Yoru. Hopefully we can have that enjoyment in our life. And so that is how I think that the meta will overall react to this balance patch. But now I'm just going to quickly talk about ranked and some of the changes that you might see in ranked instead. Okay, and so here is my ranked meta. Now the changes that I've made is basically, if you are an individualistic agent who, you know, doesn't require much team play or thought necessarily, you've gone up the list. So agents like Reyna and Sage have gone up because they're pretty simple to play, and, you know, what they do is very simple and most people can understand it. I'm sure viewers of this channel, you know, are higher thinking individuals, but, you know, for the most part in your ranked games where people don't talk, you know, nothing's going on, everything's just 5 individuals playing against 5 individuals, agents like Reyna and Sage are going to be good. I've still got Sova and Jet up there. Sova because I think his pings are really useful because you don't have to talk about them. You know, a good Sova player can find, you know, pings on the map and show where an agent is, which is really valuable at all levels. You know, just showing someone there is someone right there is going to be useful in your ranked game. So I still think Sova is useful in a ranked game. You know, agents like Chamber, Brim, very simple. Again, like if you're a simple agent, you've gone up. If you require more team play or more complex thought, like a Breach, for instance, you know, with the team play aspect of Breach, you've gone down. Astra as well has come down to D tier. You know, it requires a lot of communication and thought. And so anything that requires that communication and thought is coming down on the list, and anything that doesn't goes up in the list. And so this is my overall take for a ranked meta for you.